Welcome to the meeting number 8 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Indigenous and Northern Affairs. I'd like to start by acknowledging that I am joining you today from the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Chinantan nations. Pursuant to the order of reference of April 20th, 2020, the committee is meeting for the purpose of receiving evidence concerning matters related to the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Today's meeting is taking place by video conference, and the proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. During this meeting, the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. In order to facilitate the work of our interpreters and ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to outline a few rules. As you are speaking, if you plan to alternate from one language to the other, you will need to also switch the interpretation channel so it aligns with the language you are speaking. You may want to allow for a short pause when switching languages. It's found on the icon in the bottom center of your screen. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. When you are ready to speak, you can either click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, or you can hold down the space bar while you are talking. When you release the bar, your mic will mute itself, similar to a walkie-talkie. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. Should members need to request the floor outside of their designated time for questions, they should activate their mic and state that they have a point of order. If a member wishes to intervene on a point of order that has been raised by another member, they should use the raise hand function. This will signal to the chair your interest to speak. In order to do so, you should click on Participants at the bottom of the screen. When the list pops up, you will see next to your name that you can click Raise Hand. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. When you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. The use of headsets is strongly encouraged. If you have earbuds with a microphone, please hold the microphone near your mouth when you are speaking to boost the sound quality for our interpreters. Should any technical challenges arise, for example, in relation to interpretation, or if you are accidentally disconnected, please advise the chair or clerk immediately, and the technical team will work to resolve them. Please note that we may need to suspend during these times, as we need to ensure all members are able to participate fully. Before we get started, can everyone click on their screen in the top right-hand corner and ensure they are on gallery view? With this view, you should be able to see all of the participants in a grid view to ensure that all video participants can see one another. And during this meeting, we will follow the same rules that usually apply to the opening. Now, it's time for me to welcome our witnesses. And from the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples, we have National Chief Robert Bertrand. From the National Association of Friendship Centers, Christopher Shepherd-Biot, President, and Jocelyn Formsa, the Executive Director. From the Toronto Aboriginal Support Services Council, Larry Frost, President, and Lindsay Swooping Hawk Kretschmer, Executive Director. And from the Val d'Or Native Friendship Center, Edith Cloutier, Executive Director. And now, Chief Bertrand, we are ready to hear your opening statement. 5 minutes, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, committee members, and fellow witnesses. My name is Robert Bertrand, National Chief of the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples, or we call it CAP. I thank the committee members and staff for this invitation to share our constituents' concerns. Mr. Chair, we appreciate this invitation to appear. We also would like to thank Jamie Schmale for his recent work in Parliament and in this committee to ensure the urban Indigenous population is heard. Since 1971, CAP has been fighting tirelessly for the rights, interests, and needs of off-reserve, status, and non-status Indians, Métis, and Southern Inuit people. In 2016, the Cap Daniels Supreme Court decision unanimously ruled that non-status and Métis people are Indians under the Constitution. This decision means our people are without question an area of federal responsibility. In 2018, CAP signed a political accord with the Government of Canada to work towards including our people in federal policy. Sadly, there is a long way to go before our people have equitable treatment. CAP is also the national voice for our 10 provincial and territorial affiliates, or PTOs as we call them. They are advocates to provincial and territorial governments, just as we are with the federal government. Our PTOs are service providers. They work in areas such as housing, education, employment, health, and language. But these services cannot meet demand because they are excluded from federal funding. Our communities have been historically known as the forgotten peoples. In the past, this referred to Indigenous peoples excluded from the Indian Act, treaties, and land claim agreements. Today, we add those excluded from the government's distinction-based approach to the list. Even under the COVID pandemic, federal policies continue to discriminate. In March, government announced a $305 million support package for Indigenous peoples dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. $290 million was designated for distinction-based organizations who are focused on Indigenous peoples living on reserve and in other specific communities across Canada. $215 million of that was designated for First Nations who have historically focused very much on their on-reserve population. Less than 5%, or $15 million, was specifically designated for supporting off-reserve and urban Indigenous populations, a group of hundreds of thousands of people. $15 per capita is not enough for effective support programs for the most marginalized groups in Canada. I don't need to reiterate the poverty, chronic health issues, over-policing, and discrimination faced by our Indigenous people. Our PTOs provide help where they can, but they are held back when they cannot access federal funding on an equal footing with distinction-based organizations. Nunat Tukabut needs funding for a medical transport program. Native Council of PEI housing programs are facing funding shortfalls. The Northwest Indigenous Council in British Columbia have been working to support Indigenous homelessness on the Lower East Side.
1 minute.
But without federal funding, our PTOs cannot meet the needs that already existed before COVID-19, let alone the added pressure due to a pandemic. CAP has been told we will receive $250,000 under the Indigenous Community Support Fund. This was the result of a competitive bureaucratic process that pitted off-reserve organizations against each other. This means about $25,000 per PTO, or less than $3 per capita for those in need in our communities across the country. We are glad that the government acknowledged $15 million for urban Indigenous communities was insufficient. We said so when the funding levels were first announced in March.
We're at time right now, Chief Bertrand.
Okay, I'll be sending the rest of my notes to your committee.
And it could well come up, but right now, Mr. Christopher Shepherd Biot, please go ahead.
Atilihai Ulaukut, Christopher Shepherd Biot Yuvunga, Good morning, committee. My name is Christopher Shepherd Bia. A little bit about myself. I'm a beneficiary of the Nunat-Tsivut government. I was born and raised in Nunat-Tsivut. Currently, I'm the president of the National Association of Friendship Centers and reside with my husband, Jake, on Treaty 6 after moving to Saskatchewan, where he is a medical resident. So this reality, combined with knowledge from the friendship centers that I work with, gives me a unique and heightened insight into the current situation. I'm joined by the National Association of Friendship Centers Executive Director, Jocelyn Ormsma, and I also want to acknowledge my fellow Friendship Center colleagues, Edith Luce, Executive Director of the Val-d'Or Friendship Center, and Larry Frost, Executive Director of the Native Canadian Center of Toronto. It's a rarity that we get to present together, but it's definitely a pleasure to be on the panel with both of you. And also thank you to the committee for the invitation. My local Friendship Center colleagues are much better able to speak what's happening directly on the ground. So myself will focus on providing the national picture. The NAFC represents 107 member local friendship centers and provincial and territorial associations in every province and territory except for Prince Edward Island. Collectively, the movement is the largest and most comprehensive urban Indigenous service delivery network in this country. Last year, our members served approximately 1.4 million First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, as well as non-Indigenous people across over 1,200 programs in 238 buildings, and we employ over 2,700 people. We are proud to be a largely Indigenous women-led network, which is also a rarity, with over 70% of our local Friendship Center executive directors being women, 5 of our 6 PTA EDs also being women. The majority of our board is women, and the majority of our executive is women. What I really need you to hear today is this. Friendship Center's COVID-19 response has been nothing short of heroic in the face of enormous systemic barriers. They have become food deliverers, elder caregivers, and shelter providers. Among the systemic barriers to this essential work is the distinctions-based approach to COVID-19 relief funding that left many urban Indigenous community members we serve as unseen. The ongoing jurisdictional wrangling between federal and provincial governments, the lack of resources, training, or protective equipment, and not being engaged nationally on urban-specific approaches. Despite these significant barriers and oversights, Friendship Center movement has once again demonstrated the effectiveness of its community-driven principles, and we remain trusted, culturally relevant, holistic, so continue to provide those holistic supports for all Indigenous people living in urban, rural, and northern communities from coast to coast to coast. The NAFC continues to seek funds to ensure that urban Indigenous communities are served in this time. We are extremely concerned that reopening parts of the economy will cause the first wave to spill over the people we serve. We are still very much in the first wave while also trying to prepare for the second wave that may come. Friendship Centers should not be at risk of being decimated because we answer the call when others could not or would not, because they spent and served without proper equipment, because they put aside any regular fundraising and social enterprises, and because they show up. This is what is at risk if Canada continues to refuse to develop an action plan based on its own population data. When this is all over, the communities we continue to serve will still have all the underlying and pre-existing matters to deal with. Properly equipping and resourcing Friendship Centers to appropriately respond is but one way to invest in restarting economies. As you know, Friendship Centers as civil society hubs offer or partner to offer supports in such areas as health, education, childcare, economic development, and employment.
We're at 5 minutes there, Christopher, so I'll leave it there, and your further testimony, if it doesn't come up through our conversations, can be submitted. And now we'll go to Lindsay Swooping Hawk Kretschmer and Larry Frost, representing the Toronto Aboriginal Support Services Council. Please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Nyawa. It is an honor to be here with you today on behalf of the Toronto Aboriginal Support Services Council, which is a coalition in Toronto made up of 18 non-for-profit Indigenous-led organizations. Thank you for the introduction to our president, Larry Frost, who joins us today. We are also joined in spirit by those other 17 leaders who represent the Toronto Aboriginal Support Services Council, also known as TASC. They're behind me, as you can see. I want to begin by saying that since 1995, TASC has been a coalition of strength, a group of agencies who came together to collaborate, plan, to undertake the work of research, policy, and advocacy toward building a better Toronto for urban Indigenous people. And since 95, they have and continue to do that extremely well. Each TASC member represents a unique mandate. We have child welfare, we have justice, education, employment, and a whole host of other services and programs across the spectrum. You likely know this, but Ontario is the most populous province in the country based on the data from 2016 census, Toronto being the most populous in Ontario. There are an estimated 80,000 urban Indigenous people in Toronto, and yet there are less than 30 Indigenous-led nonprofits who are serving the needs of thousands of Indigenous people in our city. It is also estimated that approximately 90% of Indigenous children are living below LICO, the low-income cutoff, which would assume that they then are living in poverty. So there's considerable work that these agencies are undertaking individually and collectively to respond to the many needs that our city faces. I will say that the TASC member agencies, independent of TASC, are really carrying the responsibility for the people for an entire city. TASC is a coalition that showcases strength, resilience, and the fortitude of Indigenous leadership and community agencies with a focus on community, unity, and service to the people. At the onset of this pandemic, TASC member agencies responded without hesitation to the needs of community. We quickly mobilized and organized to support the community in extraordinary ways. From food hampers to PPE to virtual programming, we have and continue to do it all. The work has not stopped for any of us. TASC and its members have and will continue to rise to the occasion. We have collectively morphed into a central source of information, coordination, strength, and support to the Indigenous community. We have elevated our profile, advocacy, and fundraising efforts to demonstrate that despite the enormous challenges presented by this pandemic, we will prevail together. From the onset of the crisis, we did not wait for instructions or permission. We acted, and we had acted swiftly and responsibly. In a time when the world is recoiling, we have emerged stronger than ever. We have taken stock of what this virus is teaching us because, make no mistake, it is here to teach us something. The old way was not working. Something needs to change. It is here to remind us to act selflessly and to extend our love, kindness, and gratitude to all of life and to fulfill our roles and responsibilities with courage. We honor and stand in solidarity with all of those who have worked in the service of others during this challenging time, and we will continue to act without hesitation. And we need for our friends and allies and governments at all levels to act swiftly and committedly as we have and continue to do. And we cannot do this alone. We need you to emerge as change makers and champions alongside us. We need support and the capacity to plan, coordinate, and implement this work in partnership. It is estimated that there are over 6,000 Indigenous-led nonprofits across the country in urban areas, serving the needs of what, again, is estimated to be near 80% of us living in urban areas across the country.
1 minute.
Pardon?
Sorry, 1 minute.
1 minute. Good. All right. As we move together into a renewed future, TASC recommends 3 central actions to this committee for consideration. Action now on affordable housing for urban Indigenous families, seniors, singles. The time for action on this issue is now. Number 2, to commit to exploring concrete opportunities for federal resource allocation for Indigenous peoples who come to urban centers to access programs, and to develop a table or mechanism that formally connects urban Indigenous coalitions directly to the federal government that would meet regularly to develop and implement responses. Lastly, in closing, I want to acknowledge my TASC colleagues and the leaders who form our coalition. I am proud to be part of this group of incredible heroes, leaders, and change makers. Their collective gifts, tenacity, and wisdom is beyond inspiring, and the strength and love they have for our city is unconditional and unstoppable. Now, on behalf of TASC.
Thank you very much, and right on time. And now from the Val-d'Or Native Friendship Center, Edith Cloutier, the Executive Director. 5 minutes.
Congratulations to Madame Bérubé in particular. In participating in this panel, I would first of all mark the memory of some young people who died in a very tragic fashion. Mathieu, 41 years of age, who died by his own hand on the 18th.
I'm trying to listen to the English version and they're both at equal volume, so I have trouble hearing. Now I'm just going to switch to French because I think that's better, easier for me, but for other people, I don't know if they're having the same problem with the translation.
Madame Cloutier, si je pourrais juste vous demander de regarder dans le bas de votre écran.
Madame Cloutier, if you'd like to look at the bottom of your screen, there's a switch or button that says interpretation. If you're speaking in French, hit that and pick French or Français. Okay, it's done. Should I start from the top or can you reset the clock? Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, French, I'm sorry. Through my participation in this panel, I want to honor the memory of two young men in our community who tragically died recently. Mathieu, 41 years of age, died by his own hand on the 16th of April. And last Friday, Nathan, 19 years old, a young Cree who found lifeless in a waste container in downtown Val-d'Or. This loss are collateral damage from COVID-19. What do these young men have in common other than having come to a tragic end? Well, previously their moccasins had carried them to the Friendship Center during a period of deep distress and vulnerability, looking for an outstretched hand, support, cultural anchor, and some sense of identity. In Val-d'Or, the Friendship Center is somewhat like a tall white pine. It serves as a landmark in the urban community and has done so for 45 years. Our services encompass a wide range of issues, needs of frontline workers, health, social services, education, childcare, family service, skills development, etc. Our services, like those of other friendship centers across the country, deployed a culturally relevant and safe approach, taking into account the Aboriginal and Indigenous worldview. When the pandemic hit us hard, we carried on doing what we have always done, taking care of each other. With a proactive approach to the aftermath of the declaration made by the government of Quebec, state of emergency, March the 13th, we implemented a crisis management plan and various measures to deal with COVID-19, focusing on the support of families, youth, men, elders, and persons who are either homeless or are being released from detention. We maintained our services in legal services and others, as well as the medical services offered by our clinic, to ensure that there was no disruption of service for our members, conscious of the fact that this unprecedented crisis would also add a burden of problems, short-term, medium-term, long-term. Financial concerns and funding was not our guiding principle in insisting on continuing to serve the members of our community. We acted because there was a need to act and to act quickly, and because it was the right thing to do. But in fighting this crisis, it will have a cost. It's been very reassuring to see that the federal government has put measures in place to protect Indigenous populations by offering a fund, $305 million, in response to COVID-19. One of the blind spots of this plan, of course, is those Indigenous populations that live in urban context. It's unfortunate that the organizations which are there to help the most vulnerable themselves become vulnerable. Our experience over the last 8 years in managing this health crisis has allowed us to see that this pandemic has only increased the depression and the vulnerability of these Aboriginal populations. We are all part and parcel. We see that the tragic end of Matthew and Nathan and so many more are there to recall us of this. Miigwech. Thank you.
Much. We have 6-minute rounds of questions now. My list has Mr. Schmale, Mr. Baptiste, Madame Berube, and Madame Gazan. Jamie Schmale, 6 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the time and the content from our witnesses. This question is for National Chief Bertrand. National Chief, could you tell me CAP's role in determining community priorities for off-reserve and urban communities under COVID-19 Indigenous community response funding?
Thank you, Mr. Schmale, for your question. As you know, CAP and its PTOs are all democratically elected representative organizations, and they are the ones that are our PTOs. They're the ones that are serving the off-reserve communities. And it's important to note that these communities, they are the ones that know what their needs are, and if we do get funds where these funds are needed, we have been discriminated against because of the distinction-based approach taken by this government. You know, the Charter of Rights, the Constitution. There is no place in there that talks about AFN, ITK, and MNC. What it does say is they should be included Indians, Inuit, and Métis. Nowhere does it say the three distinction-based approach. So it's very important to make it clear to this government, and I think this is what we will be trying to do, is to make sure that we are all included in the decisions to better help the Indigenous population, whether they are on reserve or off reserve, in urban centers, in rural areas, or whatever.
So what steps does CAP need to see equal treatment under the COVID-19 Indigenous Community Support Funding?
Well, again, it's to be treated as equal. I don't know if I mentioned it in my opening remarks. We signed the political accord back in 2018. That has to be worked on. We have been working on it, but it is so slow in getting the resources to implement some of these items that were included. And the other thing that we could suggest to the government, they did sign on to UNDRIP, but now we urge them to please not only sign it, but to follow up on what UNDRIP really stands for.
Was CAP aware of the government's plan to respond to COVID-19 for Indigenous peoples, and what was your reaction to the government's announcement?
I believe CAP was aware of the announcement. I believe it was on March the 13th, and we had already reached out to request that CAP and its PTOs be included in the federal response policies before that announcement was made, but we didn't hear the criteria for the competition for funding until I believe it was mid-April, and the results we heard was I believe wasn't shared until late April. We lost a month. People would have had time to prepare, but again, because of this distinction-based approach, we were left out, and we are hoping that is why one of the reasons why we are here today, to make sure that
1 minute.
your committee suggests strongly to the government that not only the three distinction-based organizations be included, but also all the NIOs be included in their discussions with Indigenous peoples.
Okay, let's continue quickly on distinctions based. Considering CAP represents Indigenous people of all distinctions, how can this committee help ensure your constituents are not excluded from distinctions based policies?
Well, again, what you can make sure that you follow up on how the the political accord is coming along. And any new programs that are announced by CERNA or by ISK and that if affect Indigenous people, make sure that they are not only reserved for distinction-based groups, but open to everyone.
Okay, we're at time right there, Chief. Sorry to interrupt. It's time to move on now to our second speaker, which is Jaime Batiste. Mr. Batiste, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm really happy to have the ability today to discuss urban Indigenous people. I think the committee needs to get a better understanding, as well as I do, of some of the barriers that exist for Indigenous people off reserve. And so I'm going to focus a little bit on the friendship centers and ask what challenges has COVID-19 created for your organization? I know that friendship centers were often a gathering place for urban Indigenous people, and without that ability to gather, I'm wondering what programs are you currently able to offer during COVID era, and is that being communicated with those? How are we communicating with those you represent?
Maybe I could jump in and just start on that, and then hand it over to some of my colleagues. Hello, Jaime. It's good to see you. So there's a few things. I think immediately once the pandemic had been declared, friendship centers leaped into action, as well as their partner organizations, to ensure that the community was okay. Finding out where people were, finding out what was needed. So the immediate needs that were met was just, as people were being isolated, is making sure they had food and supplies, including cultural medicines, home-cooked meals, those kinds of things. What we've found, the challenges that are being faced right now is the quick transition of programs and services. So where, as you said, we were used to coming together at a building, bricks and mortar, a lot of friendship centers have had now to transition to virtual-based supports, access to protective equipment for those who are still doing direct outreach to folks. They're still meeting with people one-on-one. They're still trying to get people, like, for example, youth in care, so that they can still see their families. Like, there's still some one-on-one in-person community, like, service delivery. But then there's also the virtual stuff. So being able to access equipment, technology, hitting data limits, hitting, for some of the ones in the north, internet packages or just internet service at all. And also being able to lend out equipment to community members so that they can have a point of access for their family members, for the Friendship Center to check in. So the program adaptation, technology, mental health has been a huge challenge. So we've got a large number of, like we said, Indigenous women leading our network who are not just the caretakers of the community, but also the caretakers at home. And so that's really just, we can kind of deal with the mental health challenges, but leading through that and making decisions on behalf of the community and constantly not feeling they're doing enough, or feeling guilty about what is and is not being done. Definitely the coordination of the resources. We know in the urban spaces, not a whole lot of resources were made available from the federal government. The challenge has also been with the provincial, territorial, and municipal funding. It really hasn't materialized, except for in a few provinces. And then the ongoing goods, food, sanitation, other kinds of infrastructure supports to renovate centers into safer spaces for the community. So I'll just pause there for now, but those have been the immediate and ongoing challenges. Thank you.
Can you give a sense, a lot of you have talked to, and friendship centers, I'll just stick with this in terms of, there are barriers right now for Indigenous people that are living in urban settings. Can you tell me, a lot of the programs that we provide for municipalities or urban locations kind of believes that First Nations or Indigenous people will be included in that. Often there's barriers or challenges that have it so that they can't access these programs. Are we hearing a lot about that during the COVID era, or do you feel like the programs that we've rolled out in urban settings have been easy to access for First Nations and Indigenous people off reserve?
1 minute.
I'll just make one quick point on that. What we find is different from what First Nations are able to offer. Their not all. I can't blanket statement anything, because there are some exceptions. But the Friendship Centers really have offered that culturally appropriate wraparound support. So it's a little bit more than what you might be receiving just if you're getting financial aid, or if you're able to get access from a food bank or something like that. Friendship Centers are able to just, they have the trust with the community members. And so they're able to do a lot more with a single interaction. So I think that's what's unique and what has really been missing. I know a lot of First Nations are doing their best to try to outreach and support their off-reserve members. But they're just, physically not able to often offer that full wraparound support for those members. And so I think that's where we need to partner and work together to ensure that we're not leaving those gaps for off-reserve First Nations.
That's our time. Thank you very much. And next we go to Bloc Québécois and Sylvie Bérubé, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I'd like to thank all our witnesses for their presentations. My first questions will be for Madame Cloutier from Val-d'Or. Here's my question. Currently, what is the major obstacle that is impeding you from establishing all your services in your friendship centers? Well, thank you. I would have to agree with what was said by my colleagues as to the challenges that we face. There seems to be an absence of any recognition on the part of the federal government as to the conditions in our urban communities, Indigenous, the needs of urban populations, Indigenous populations, of course, are quite short. We've heard, and I think we'll hear more speak of this later, this approach and distinction-based approach for the delivery of services is in fact a recognition of those characteristics that are unique to these groups, whether it's First Nations, Inuit, Métis, all Indigenous groups. And for specific urban context, we are sort of making this part of the population invisible. They seem to disappear on an urban background. So when we're confronted with a global crisis, and we find ourselves in the full front of this crisis, access to limited funding because, of course, distinction-based approach. It makes it very, very difficult to secure an adequate response in terms of services, adequacy of services, and it has to be reviewed very, very quickly. We have to upgrade it quickly. We find ourselves sort of silenced, without a voice. We're not being heard, and we would like to be able to be heard. Right now, this is not the case, and be able to offer direct services to these populations. I don't know how much time I have left, but there was, once upon a time, a special program for friendship centers up to about 10 years ago. Unfortunately, that program was merged with a broader program, a bigger program, which really was quite a negative effect on the friendship center networks. We need some dedicated, targeted funding for Native friendship centers in over 100 cities in Canada. And there has to be a recognition that if you recognize the validity of our network, recognize the validity of our needs. We are frontline, and it's a pan-Canadian organization, as I've mentioned before. Our friendship structure is probably the biggest community-based service provider dealing with specific needs of a specific population. And we in fact offer services to a very broad and very wide population. And that specific friendship center funding, when it disappeared, really was quite damageable to us. We'd like to see it reinstated. Thank you. I have another question. What are your major concerns during this pandemic crisis? I suppose you're going to stand by what you just said. Yes, and I mentioned it in my presentation. We can't deal with a pandemic crisis on an equal footing. I mean, you can't stay home alone if you don't have a home. And if you try social distancing and you have no, how can you be safe at home if the house is a violent home? How can we deal with anxiety, with depression, with mental health challenges? But, you know, the social inequalities are always there. That's your starting point. It's not a level playing field. And it's, in fact, the quality of life, the access to equitable health services could perhaps level some of this inequality. Our centers have a certain agility in responding rapidly to these issues, and we are frontline, we're there in the field. And we have to also look forward to post-COVID-19 because it's going to eventually come to a close, we hope, but social inequality will be only increased. Thank you very much, Madame Cloutier. Thank you for your question.
So much. And now for 6 minutes, Ms. Gazan.
Thank you very much, Chair. My first question is for the Toronto Aboriginal Support Service Council, Lindsay. So according to the Aboriginal Housing Management Association, systemic impacts of colonization, including the forced incarceration of children in residential schools and systemic barriers, including institutional racism, patriarchy, and higher numbers of Indigenous children aging out of care has resulted in Indigenous people being 8 times more likely to experience homelessness when compared to the rest of the Canadian population. This has become even more pronounced with the COVID-19 as a crisis. Do you think that the current federal response is adequate to address the crisis of urban Indigenous homelessness? And if not, can you identify some of those gaps?
No, thank you for your question. With all due respect, if the current federal response were adequate, I don't know that we would be having this conversation. I don't know that if we represent, let's say they say around 3% of the population here in Toronto as Indigenous people, that we would represent over 16% of the homeless. I don't know that the plight statistics, the litany of plight statistics that currently face our people would remain such if we had solutions. We do need capital. We do need swift, actionable responses. Yesterday, the time for consultation, the time for talking, we're past that point. We need some land, quite frankly, we do. In line with reconciliation, with MMNW, we need governments to coordinate with each other to start thinking about some of those vacant that are own properties.
Welcome to the conference center.
Carving off some land and returning it to Indigenous groups to build affordable housing for Indigenous people to respond to these issues.
Thank you so much. My question is for Christopher or Jocelyn from the National Association of Centers. My question, prior to COVID-19, the government provided $54 million for the entire country for urban organizations and communities, something that I believe is completely adequate. This has also been noted by your organization, the National Association of Friendship Centers, who have called for more funding for services to meet the needs of urban Indigenous peoples. Given the large number of Indigenous people living in urban centers, how could the government better support culturally and socially relevant services and programs to respond to the distinct needs of specific Indigenous groups? And how can you identify can you identify some of the current systemic gaps that are leaving urban Indigenous populations more vulnerable?
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
What's your point of order?
I'm being told that everybody on the phone in line is not being able to hear the last questions and answers for. We're all hearing it here, but people on the phone in line are not able to follow at this point all of a sudden.
Madam Clerk, have any suggestion on that?
Hi, yes. So we were told that there was a problem with the phone lines being scrambled. They're resetting the phone lines right now.
So we'll wait for a moment, Madam Clerk. I'll suspend the time for a second. Okay.
How much time do I have left, Chair?
I'm going to give you till the hour. I think we're about 2 minutes that we lost there. So you have 3 minutes, 2.5 minutes.
I would take 3. Just kidding, Mr. Chair. I'll take the 3 though if I can. Yes, thank you.
You're down to 2.5.
So are we answering now?
Yes.
Okay. Quickly, I think there's a lot of talk around distinctions based and what does that mean? And, anecdotally, we look at it as how the government interacts with 3 large Indigenous representative organizations. What will soon come from NAFC is a policy paper on the challenges with that, but taken from a feminist, queer perspective that looks at the intersectionality of urban Indigenous people, and also looks at challenging the government's stance on GBA plus analysis. Because if you look at COVID-19 financial response and whether that was truly put through a GBA plus analysis.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
They're still not able to hear. Sorry, I'm not trying to be interrupting everybody, but the people on the phone line still can't hear.
Who's on the phone line, Gary?
A bunch of staff from our side. I assume other people have people on the phone line as well.
Well, I'm not sure how much longer we can hold off because we have all our witnesses and committee members here. Madam Clerk, can you advise?
Welcome to the conference center.
Perhaps we should just suspend for a moment while I try to get this sorted.
All right, we'll.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
What's your point of order?
I'm wondering if we have all of the members present and the witnesses able to answer the question, if we could not just continue because all of the people who are supposed to be on Zoom. So yeah. I just see that, can we not just give them a written transcript of what was said because they have no speaking role at this anyway?
Mr. Chair?
I'm sorry, the clerk has the floor now. Go ahead, clerk.
I'm told that if staff listens on Parleview, the languages are working well on Parleview right now.
Okay, can you pass that information? Hopefully someone's picked that up. And so given that they are able to access it through Parleview, I think we should continue. And I'll give Ms. Gazan 2 minutes to complete.
So we've also done that GBA plus analysis of some of the announcements because we feel that it isn't responsive. Specific gaps, employment and training, considering the massive budget that Canada has for Indigenous employment and training, the lack of that for urban people, the fact that there's no urban Indigenous or Indigenous youth specific funding support or a program, which did exist when Friendship Centers did have a unique core program like my colleague Edith spoke about. And just generally, I guess, appreciating and acknowledging our 70-year history in this country, that the majority of us don't live in Inuit, Unigat, Métis homelands, or First Nations, and that the funding should just be reflective and that Canada needs to follow its own population data in creating policy and programs.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have one final question for the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples, Chief Bertrand. You indicated in your opening presentation that the $15 million of the government's allocation in response to COVID was not adequate, given the fact that what you had mentioned that, prior to this, we know that Indigenous people have higher rates of poverty, experience greater homelessness. How has that impacted nationally the ability to respond to the diverse needs of Indigenous peoples?
Could you do that in 30 seconds, please? Go ahead with the answer.
Thank you. The little amount of money that we have received created quite a bit of how should I put this, uneasiness with our PTOs, so much so that the board of directors met, and the $250,000 is an insult, and we will be sending the money back, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much.
Chair,
I'm sorry. Yes. Who's speaking?
It's Robert Bertrand, the National Chief.
Yes, Robert.
I would just like to inform the Committee of News from CAP from this morning
Mr. Veer, we'll wait for that opportunity to come up later. Right now, we're going to go to Mr. Veerson for 5 minutes. This is a 5-minute round, and Mr. Veerson, go ahead, please.
Take it off on mute there. Mr. Bertrand, please finish your thought.
Okay. Can you hear? Can you hear me?
Go ahead. Yeah, yes, please go ahead. Yep.
Okay. The Congress of Aboriginal Peoples has been left with no choice but to initiate legal proceedings against the Government of Canada on behalf of the off-reserve and urban Indigenous peoples over ongoing inequitable treatment in violation of their rights. Government continues to underfund, deny the rights of self-determination, and violate rights under the Constitution and UNDRIP through their policies. We have highlighted these inequities before and will continue to do so, Mr. Chair. But since political leaders have not taken action, we have no choice but to seek a remedy through the courts, as we did with the Cap Daniels case. That's what I wanted to bring to your attention, Mr. Chair, this morning.
Thank you.
Just point of order. Is anyone hearing a high-pitched buzzing when Chief Bertram is speaking? It seems like National Chief, do you have a pot of tea on that? I get a real high buzzing. Is anyone else getting that?
Yeah, I get a little bit of it as well.
No, everything is turned off here.
Okay, Mr. Veerson, go ahead, please.
Thank you. One of the issues that I've had two constituents come and speak to me. Renee and Rodney have both come, and they're concerned about inconsistencies, both of the enforcement of the rules, but also in the way that the benefits have been rolled out. So they both live on reserve, yet have family that lives off of reserve, and have had family members that are struggling to pay for groceries and things like that, and are frustrated with the fact that they're unable to, the benefits that they have on reserve, they're unable to get to their family members that are off reserve. I guess I'll start with you, Mr. Bertrand, and then I'll go to the Toronto Aboriginal Support Services Council. Is this an experience that you are hearing more of, and is there a solution that you could recommend, Mr. Bertrand?
Thank you again. Thank you again for your questions, and I'm glad that you brought it up, because it just what you said shows the inequalities of what we and I mean we by CAP and our PTOs, what we are living through right now. The distinction-based approach that the government has been using, most of the help and the resources are going to the on reserve, while the people off reserve are being denied access to programs, to financial help and resources. What we've been saying, what we've been asking from the beginning, is just to be treated equal. So people, as you mentioned, the people that are off reserve want the same help, the same resources that the on reserve are getting. That is what we are asking, Mr. Chair, and we are hoping by appearing before your committee this morning that you will also be able to stress to the government the inequalities, as that I mentioned before.
1 minute, Mr. Veerson, go ahead.
I'd just like to hear a response to that from the Toronto Aboriginal Services Council.
If I can, I'd like to turn it over to our president, Larry Frost, to have a chance to speak.
Take your mute off, Mr. Frost. There you go.
Okay, what was the question? I had a little problems with my mute about 3 minutes ago. I just got back on.
Oh, no problem at all. I'm hearing from constituents in my area. I represent 14 First Nations, particularly a lady named Renee was contacting me frustrated with the fact that there seemed to be quite an inconsistency between the rollout of services and also how the lockdown has been affecting them in terms of getting groceries is just one of the things. And so on reserve, chief and council takes care of their families fairly well. Off reserve, like people that belong to their band but don't live on reserve, unable to access any sort of help through the band. I'm just wondering if you have a solution for that, and if that's something that you're hearing about.
Oh, is the question
very quickly?
Is the question on reserve or off reserve?
Well, that's the challenge: is the difference in the rollouts of services.
Because like on reserve tasks would help anyone, which we're doing with food hampers as I speak. But on reserve, if we can work together somehow, I mean, it's all about helping each other, right?
Okay, I'm sorry, I'll have to interrupt at that point because we're well over time, and that perhaps that if you can flesh that out later on a further question, or send us a written submission. Mr. Pulowski, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thanks to all the witnesses. I'm from Thunder Bay, which I think has proportionately the highest or the largest urban Indigenous population of any major city in Canada. So this conversation is very pertinent to us. Now, I'm trying to figure out the financing of the urban Indigenous population. So am I right or wrong in thinking that if you're from somewhere like Pikangikum or Webequie, First Nation, and you're living in Thunder Bay, and a lot of people from these communities are living in Thunder Bay, do they not still continue to remain part of the Webequie or Pikangikum First Nations and get some benefits still from the band?
Yeah, I could speak to that a little bit. So yes, you're right, and a lot of First Nations have extended, not all of them, but I know of many of them that have extended the support funds that they've received to their off-reserve members. But I guess it goes again to what's available off-reserve that they can access. So I mean, $150 or $200 or $75, whatever it is, that's not going to go very far to buy groceries for a couple of weeks, so you don't have to go as often. If there's any transportation, if they're still working, if there's children in the home, I think the piece is, yes, they're very much still a member, and I'm a member of Moose Cree First Nation. I'm living here in Ottawa, so the benefits that are extended to the off-reserve members are limited from the First Nation side, which is why we're saying, the Friendship Centers are there to provide not just the availability of services, but accessibility to urban Indigenous community members, so that they're better able to access, not just food or not just helping them navigate to apply for the CERB benefits or in senior benefits, which some Friendship Centers are doing. They've actually installed computers that are inside, but then the keyboard is outside, so people could come and actually apply for their benefits, the federal benefits, at the Friendship Center in a safe manner. They're providing that full wraparound community support that I think is very crucial for anybody. The isolation, mental health, those are things that are affecting our people more than, well, I don't want to say more than, because I know our people are either infected with COVID and or have passed away from it, and we don't even really know about it because we aren't collecting the data. So I think there's a lot to what you've asked. But yes, we're still very much members of our communities, but the wraparound community supports that we're able to access is very limited when we're not living on reserve. And the same for Inuit living in the South. Friendship Centers serve tens of thousands of Inuit who are living in urban settings. And it's the same for the funding that Inuit, the land claim organizations received. From what we're hearing, we're not, and our president would be able to speak more to that if there's a follow-up question. But the access for urban Inuit isn't as robust. We talk a lot about First Nations, but I think that's a population that also has a lot of very unique needs that we've been doing our best to meet without the necessarily support from the regions. In some cases, yes,
okay.
But
1 minute. Yes, 1 minute. Go ahead.
Okay. So I think you already mentioned something else I was going to ask, which was that I think the urban Indigenous population, the Indigenous population as a whole, is still able to claim the curb, the wage subsidy, and I assume that that's part of what the Friendship Centers are also doing, is to try to help the urban Indigenous community to access those other programs and other sources of funding.
Yes, maybe Edith, you could speak to a bit more to that.
Yeah, 30 seconds. Go ahead.
If nobody's answering, could I just chime in?
I'm not sure, Madam Clerk, whether we lost Ms. Cloutier's, whether she was on mute.
She was on mute, Chair. I could see her lips moving.
Okay, so 30 seconds, please, Ms. Cloutier.
Can you hear me now? I'm sorry. Technology is difficult. What I was saying is that Indigenous Friendship Centers do help community members have access to special programs, but it's not just during a pandemic. It's something we do daily. It's something we do always. Our link with the community allows us to do that. Just to give you an idea, I know Thunder Bay quite well.
We're way over time, and we'll hold. Perhaps that you can conclude that in a further part of the meeting. Right now, it's Mr. Vidal's session for 5 minutes. Mr. Vidal, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question is going to be for either Jocelyn and Christopher, or maybe both if they're interested. As I'm sure you're aware, the Northwest region of Saskatchewan is the absolute hotbed of COVID-19 in Indigenous communities. I mean, we have First Nations, Métis, and municipalities all working together and affected by the crisis in Northwest Saskatchewan. Earlier on, MP Baptiste asked about the needs being met by friendship centers across the nation, so to speak. But in Northwest Saskatchewan, we have at least 3 friendship centers right in this region, and we don't think of Northwest Saskatchewan as being a urban center, but you have 3 friendship centers right in this hotbed of activity right now. I guess my question would be, relative to the comment that Jocelyn made earlier about quick transition to providing services, and kind of in that context, what are these friendship centers in Northwest Saskatchewan being able to do as far as contributing to this crisis, kind of specifically right on the ground in the hotbed of activity right now?
Thank you, Mr. Riddell. I have the benefit of living in Saskatchewan during this time, and this is, I think, the crux of what some of the visibility problems are, is that like our members are in over 100 communities in this country, from megatropolises to 1,000-person communities, and a lot of the time, sometimes the mid to lower sized communities, they may be the community hub for Indigenous people. So when you think of La Loche comes up a lot. We have an amazing, incredible friendship center there, led by an amazing team of people. But just understanding that there's this assumption that many of their members are getting support from multiple sources of funding when they're actually not. One of the biggest challenges we're experiencing right now is food, diapers, formula. When we reach out to large distributors, we're treated as if we were any small organization contacting them, even when we're representing, say, 10 organizations. And so our office has actually already sent multiple boxes of even PPE to that region, just to try to enable the employees to continue to do their jobs. We have the benefit of, in Saskatchewan, of having a really good relationship with the Office of the Treaty Commissioner and FSIN, and we've been trying to collaborate to do this. But in essence, not every region has that relationship, and not the PPE and some of the more emergent supplies are just not available. And it's extremely frustrating when you have staff who are on the front lines trying to support people, and all they want is a mask. And there's no direct mechanism, even if you have a listing of distributors, that you're going to get food or diapers or formula. And when these communities that are extremely close together, like for example, Buffalo Narrows and La Loche, you get situations where communities get nervous of having people travel in, say, for food. And so the centers may seem like they're in a remote area, but I grew up in the Arctic in a town of 200 that was flying only. That's remote. La Loche is a drive. Yet it's still like cut off from even some of the most basic supplies. And if we don't try to provide the resources and even access, it's just going to continue to harm communities, and we're going to lose more and more elders, which that area has already seen.
Thank you. I know I don't have a lot of time left. There's just a quick follow-up, maybe, Christopher. I know there was some frustration that your organization expressed with the process involved in the application and getting the money out. We're now a few more weeks down the road. We heard your comments a few weeks ago at the Health Committee, I believe. Would you maybe just follow up with a comment on how the process has now played out 3-4 weeks down the road beyond kind of where your comments were at that time?
Less than a minute. Go ahead, please.
So we finally did receive resources, but I'll reiterate what I said back then. You forced the largest portion of Indigenous people in this country to compete for the smallest amount. I don't have another way to describe that, but now we've moved beyond that as an organization, and we're looking post-COVID-19 and for an opportunity to help rebuild a community that was fractured and not supported prior to this. And so that's what sort of we offer is we have a massive network that we would like to use to help the largest majority of Indigenous people after this is said and done, hopefully.
Thank you very much. And we go now for a 5-minute round of questioning with Ms. Demoff.
Thank you, Chair. I want to start by acknowledging I'm sitting today in the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Edith, I want to extend my condolences to you on the loss of the two people that you mentioned. And I want to thank all of you for the work that you're doing, in particular adapting your services in unprecedented times to be able to deliver much needed services to urban Indigenous peoples. And I think we knew there was a gap before, and this pandemic has just highlighted issues that exist in urban settings. The ministers acknowledged that the $15 million fund is not enough. That's in addition to funding that went through Reaching Home and the Canada Child Benefit and CERB, which I know a number of your organizations are assisting people to apply for. Lindsay, you mentioned that there needs to be an urban Indigenous coalition of organizations like yours. And I know prior to this happening, there was a meeting in Ottawa, which I attended and the minister spoke at. And I'm just wondering if you could speak to whether or not that coalition has been in touch with each other during COVID-19 and how that is coming in terms of getting you to come together as an organization to speak as one voice.
Nyala, Pam, thank you for your question. I can't speak to whether or not coalitions have been connecting independently. The national coalition's scope right now is made up of 32 other cities across Canada. So we do have provinces and territories coming together in an effort to form what we hope will be a voice for urban Indigenous organizations that may not be represented under some of the current constructs that exist for urban. To be fair, I think there have been tremendous efforts made to date. The coalition, the national coalition has been forming for the last better part of 2 years. We do have a governance structure that is led by Mark and Charlene, whom I think you met when you were in Ottawa. It's a real good opportunity, I think, for us to think about how we might do better to connect with one another to get a sense of the landscape. But at this time, I can't accurately answer whether or not that is in fact happening. Nyala.
I want to talk a little bit about connectivity, because we tend to think of connectivity as only being a rural issue, but it's actually an urban issue as well. And I've had these conversations certainly with Task. And I wonder if we could maybe start with you and then go to the friendship centers, because it's really pointed out socioeconomic divide in accessing programs and services that have been offered during the pandemic, when people who don't have internet have been forced, or devices have been, and normally go to community centers, libraries, friendship centers, have been forced to go, they just can't access it. So I wonder, maybe Task could start, and then we can go to the friendship centers. What are you seeing on the ground in terms of connectivity?
Sure. On the ground, we have collectively been advocating for a fully connected city. We have been working with different levels of the city and province, trying to advance the issue around connectivity and device acquisition in order to put devices into the hands of those that need it most. Ways in which we've responded is member agencies have actually gone out to purchase minutes for cell phones, purchase devices to those that are most vulnerable, particularly seniors and students. As you know, most provinces have rolled out curriculum from their respective ministries. And for us, in the context of urban Indigenous people being able to access that information, if you got, every parent got an email, I got one, but if I didn't have a device or internet, then my kid is currently not doing their homework in theory. So we've been trying to respond by word of mouth and through a variety of other mechanisms across social media channels and through different forms of outreach electronically and otherwise to try to reach folks who do need the supports. And so we've been doing it sort of on a case by case as needed basis. But it would be great to have a fully connected city here in Toronto. Noah.
Maybe if I could just add quickly on that. So certainly, like in the early days, we did reach out to some of the staff of the coalition tables, and it was something that we had called for too with our conversations with Indigenous services, that an easy mechanism, which is an existing, is to have funded the national or the urban coalition tables and friendship centers, recognizing that a lot of them work in partnership with each other to provide that community support. So I definitely echo what Lindsay has said. And nationally, we're also trying to, we've been talking to some companies about trying to get a national purchase of equipment, mostly cell phones and tablets that are data enabled, as well as internet boosters, and calling for that connectivity piece, because it's an issue all across the country, making sure that people have access to the things that they need to be able to finish school, to be able to connect with their family members and the community. So it's a huge issue, and it's certainly one that's not been resolved yet.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're at time there, and we go now to a 2.5 minute round. And I have on my list our next speaker from Bloc Québécois, Christina Michaud. Please go ahead for 2.5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, thank you to all the witnesses. I'd like to offer my sincere condolences to the family and friends of the two young men from Val d'Or. It's unanimous with what we've heard today that the approach, distinction-based approach, does not allow friendship centers to achieve their mission. I'd like to talk about I have a question to the National Association of Friendship Centers. How would the government, should the government have gone forward to so that you can offer services to population, and more specifically also for Val d'Or?
Est-ce qu'on m'entend en français? Je vais aller ici. Est-ce qu'on...
Can you hear me in French? Yes? Thank you for your question. I've mentioned it in my presentation that this approach that's put forward by ISK and the government hides the voice of Indigenous people in urban settings. We need to reflect our realities in action. If I look at the local, with a local lens, and that could be also done on a national scale, these friendship centers show that there are clear needs that are not met. In the 50 days of the COVID-19 crisis in Val d'Or, the Friendship Center has been the main organization to give over 4,000 lunches for people that are homeless. We have a day center. We have over 500 food baskets that have been distributed through through services. We receive over 100 calls per week. So there's this reality. We need to act also for post-COVID, we need to show that we were there to serve these people before COVID. We are there during the crisis and we'll be there afterwards. It's shown by the work we're doing on the ground. Thank you for the question. I think that my colleagues from the national level will be able to complete the answer.
Yeah, just a little sneak
just
peek.
about out of time. Sorry, go ahead.
I'll be quick. Just a little sneak peek on the policy paper that we're going to be releasing. We just say that First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people living in urban settings have multiple intersecting diversities that make up their identities. So we are looking at, when you're applying a distinctions-based lens, that you're not just looking at First Nations, Métis, Inuit, you're looking at where they're physically, geographically located, and their residency, as well as a gendered lens, so looking at the effects on women, as well as Two-Spirit LGBTQ plus individuals. So we're saying by applying these lenses, you'll be able to see people a lot better and have better policy decisions.
Thank you very much. And now we go for another 2.5-minute round of questioning with Ms. Kakak. Please go ahead.
Matna, thank you, Chair. And thank you to all the witnesses for sharing with us here today on this committee. My questions for the president of National Association Friendship Centers. I think something that we haven't been talking much about is mental health during COVID-19. My riding in particular, Nunavut, resources in terms of mental health is something that is scarce and much needed. Can you talk more about some of the mental health supports that you're providing during COVID-19, the challenges that you're facing, and what you're still hoping to implement? And take as much time as you'd like.
So I am from the north as well. I am from a specific part of the north that for most of my high school education had the highest rate of suicide in the world. This is something that I think Canada talks about. Canada talks about mental health, and yet when there are opportunities to truly make an effect, it doesn't happen. So a specific example is our entire National Youth Council developed a suicide awareness and a training program for young people that could be delivered across the country, and submitted it during a proposal call. It was not funded. This is something that young people develop directly for each other. And I think we talk a lot about health and mental health, but I have yet to see a response that isn't reactionary and that is truly developed with communities. And so as my own personal experience, being a young gay Inuk in the north, I understand how isolating it is to be a young person who's Indigenous, who feels already isolated. I understand how easy it is to get into a space where you are so sad and so alone that some of those more negative outcomes are a possibility. And so I think if Canada really, really wants to work on mental health, they should probably reach out to some of the friendship centers who are getting 47 times as many calls right now on domestic violence.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we go to a 5-minute round with first speaker up from the Conservative Party, Bob Zimmer. Bob, go ahead for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a question for Mr. Shepherd, and it's really for all the witnesses today. It's based on my role as a shadow minister for Northern Economic Development. So that's kind of how I'm going to frame my questions. But I would agree with all of you that one of my big concerns about we talk about an economic recovery are especially the elders that are at risk for not having the proper PPE and other abilities to shield themselves from COVID. So just understand, I preface my question with that. But I would ask Mr. Shepherd, and you had spoke about this a little bit, about the difficulty accessing PPE. And again, with the economic recovery in mind, I know a lot of our young people and want to get back to work, but also obviously don't want to put their elders at risk and any of their community members at risk. We've seen locally, one of our reserves have had a few cases of COVID, and we all know that the living conditions aren't always the best. And I guess I would ask that question of you, Mr. Shepherd. What would you see as necessary to get to the next step? And I know some of us would agree that, even right now isn't adequate. So what do you see it needing to go forward to get to that place where we can so-called get back to normal? Mr. Shepherd.
I think there's a huge, and we keep premising some of like our network. We talk about it a lot, but in my opening statement, I talked about just the sheer number of physical urban Indigenous buildings and spaces across this country. Canada has a built-in network of agencies and infrastructure that they could use as economic stimulus. If there was a national urban Indigenous infrastructure fund that wasn't just 5 million this year, 8 million next year, that they looked at that as a part of the economic recovery, but also looking to the future. If we truly want to plan appropriately, maybe we look at how can these infrastructure spaces be properly designed, built to be, in the event this happens again, way better designed and prepared moving forward. And so that doesn't just do good things for service delivery, it also does good things for having isolation spaces, gathering spaces that are safe, but also an economic driver in over 100 ridings or communities in this country. That is an amazing opportunity for Canada to get stimulus to the ground in local economies while also looking to the future. And so I think Canada needs to stop looking at friendship centers as, the people who help the most vulnerable, but more as a partner that can truly shift how we look at our demographics, economies, and sustainability moving forward.
Absolutely. I have an old friend that I used to work with that is heads up the local friendship center, and it's absolutely great for the youth and really trying to get, those youth to that next step and into a great life. I just have to interrupt my question with, I have a motion to table. Mr. Chair, that pursuant to Standing Order 108-2, that the Standing Committee on Indigenous and Northern Development adopt the following motion: that in the light of COVID-19 pandemic and how it has negatively impacted on the governance of Indigenous communities, including the postponement of elections and gathering of traditional decision-making bodies, that the committee called the Wet'suwet'en elected chiefs to provide testimony on how the COVID-19 pandemic has negatively affected their ability to enter into open and transparent negotiations regarding land, rights, and title with the federal government.
Any comments on the motion?
Chair.
I'm not sure I understand. Marcus, you go first.
I didn't understand it. You're asking to have a session to debate this issue. Is that what you're asking? Sorry.
Well, we're asking to have the Wet'suwet'en elected chiefs, as the motion said. I can reread the motion if you wish. I just read it once, so sometimes it's good to hear it twice. I can do it. Let me just do it again. It won't take that long. That pursuant to Standing Order 108-2, the Standing Committee on Indigenous and Northern Development adopt the following motion: that in the light of COVID-19 pandemic and how it has negatively impacted on the governance of Indigenous communities, including the postponement of elections and gathering of traditional decision-making bodies, that the committee call the Wet'suwet'en elected chiefs to provide testimony on how the COVID-19 pandemic has negatively affected their ability to enter into open and transparent negotiations regarding land, rights, and title with the federal government.
Mr. Zimmer, is this a notice of motion or is this a motion?
It is notice of motion.
Thank you.
Just just to add to this, I appreciate the member wanting to understand the internal ratification process of the Wet'suwet'en Nation. I just don't see how this is COVID related, and I don't see how during a discussion about off reserve with the witnesses that we have available to us right now, that we'd pivot and go back to on reserve and Aboriginal title lands that they're not here to listen to. I'm wondering what's the why.
I'm going to interject at this point and call the motion out of order because it doesn't relate to the mandate of the committee. We're at 12:38, so that means we're on to Ms. Zan for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Excuse me, point of order, Mr. Chair.
What is your point of order?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's the prerogative of the chair to decide what's relevant and not with regard to a motion. I think that's the decision of the committee, and there's clearly a COVID-related issue with the motion. So I'm not sure.
How so?
It's at your discretion to just. I think it's up to the committee to decide that.
Point of order, Chair.
Let's go ahead.
I think, you know, I think we've had meeting after meeting, ongoing discussions about this matter. I propose, since, you know, some of the Conservative members want to meddle in internal community politics, perhaps if we do put that on the table, we should invite all parties involved in the discussion. I would say that it's probably not a good use of time given the nature of things we're discussing.
Ms. Guzan, and I'm going to interrupt. I'm sorry. We're not. It's a notice of motion is not debatable. We're moving on with the meeting at this point, and we're also using up valuable time from some of our other questioners. So we were going to be very nicely on time at 1 o'clock. And so now we're on a bit sidetracked. So I want to get us back on track. Ms. Zan, you have 5 minutes. Please go ahead with your question.
Thank you very much. And yes, I'd like to acknowledge that I am sitting here on the unceded land of the Mi'kmaq, very gratefully and very thankfully to them. Can you hear me okay, everybody? I'm okay. Okay, I'd like to ask a question of Madame Formsma regarding friendship centers and what you are noticing with regards to the violence against women, domestic violence. We're told that numbers show statistically across the country that in times like this of this shutdown, violence and domestic violence has risen in many parts of the country up to even 30%, which is why our government has put money into shelters and transition houses, you know, 207.5 million to support many organizations, 40 million to the women and gender equality centers, 26 million to women's shelters, et cetera, et cetera. What, if anything, is this helping in your communities, in Indigenous communities across the country? And is the friendship centers across the country able to access any of that funding? And if so, how do you use it? And if not, what do you need?
Thank you. Maybe I could just speak to what we're hearing nationally, and then I don't know if members from Task or Edith from Val-d'Or have any comments about what they're experiencing locally, but we have heard that the increases in calls to friendship centers to support with violence in the home, what's happening is because of the isolation measures that where we put or where we can remove or move people is very limited. So shelters that friendship centers are running or partner with, again, I'll go back to the availability doesn't always mean accessibility. So just because the funding has been available and theoretically friendship centers should have been able to access some of that, I can't say that it's been a widespread accessible to friendship centers. So a lot of the First Nations funding for shelters went on reserve, which very rightfully so. And then the funding for women's shelters in just generally also went to like a lot of the mainstream or women's shelters within the urban spaces. So we kind of end up in that jurisdictional gap again, where if there's something available off reserve, because we're seen as Indigenous nonprofits, that they think that the federal government has given us money for something, or that it's the federal government's responsibility. And then the federal government is saying, well, this money is available to all organizations. You should be able to access it through those means. You don't need a specific amount for urban Indigenous. So yes, we definitely have heard the increase, and the ability for friendship centers to access the funding has really been quite piecemeal across the country. Certainly nationally, we haven't been able to get anything cohesive through our office. Not to say that we should, but that's been our experience. So I don't know if Edith or Task might have a more localized experience.
Does anybody want to respond?
Task,
Hi.
speaking.
Thank
Hi.
you.
At the local level here in Toronto, we've mobilized very quickly across member agencies, in particular Native Women's Resource Center, Thunder Women Healing Lodge Society, and ALS, Aboriginal Legal Services, and Council Fire have worked collaboratively to try to address getting a crisis line together and trying to put funding proposals into the province in particular, trying to work with the city on getting hoteling. We've been actively moving, but we do need governments to move with us at all levels, because right now some of these agencies are in fact out of pocket for the expenditures of trying to hotel people to make sure that they have a safe place to land. So while we're all sorting out, as my colleague Jocelyn said, our jurisdictional issues, I think what we're finding is that the work doesn't stop, the need doesn't stop. If a woman needs to leave her home with her children, it needs to happen now, whether agencies have money to support that or not. Those are transportation costs, food costs, laundry costs, the relocation costs, and hoteling. And then where is the permanent housing to place them when this is over?
This is, we're at time there. Thank you for that. And we go now back to the Conservative Party. Mr. Schmale, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. And again, thank you again for the witnesses. I'll go back to National Chief Bertrand, if I could. National Chief, this morning on the news, there is many articles about your organization starting a lawsuit against the federal government. Is there anything more you'd like to say to that?
Thank you, Mr. Schmale. The only thing that I could add is, we have tried on numerous occasions to reach out to the federal government, to CERNA, to ISK, to try and increase the funding, because the amount CAP has received is for our constituents across Canada is a slap in the face. And after hours of discussion at the board of directors level, we hate to have done it, but it was, in our opinion, it was the only option left to help our constituents. Yes, CAP is out there. The executive is out there to try and help out, but never forget, we are there for our constituents. We are there for, the people in PEI, the people in Winnipeg, the people in Prince Albert, the people in Edmonton, the people out. We are there. We want to help our constituents, and we felt that this was the only way. When you're stuck in the corner, you got no place to go. This was the only option left open to us.
Now, maybe just to give the committee, I know many people know these stats, so maybe anyone listening in or viewing, maybe you can talk about the number of people that have affiliations with your organization that you could be assisting if given the proper resources.
Well, I just mentioned a few of them a while ago in my opening remarks. In PEI, the organization there helps the youth with housing. In the other Maritimes province, they have commercial fishing. There is the organizations that we have. They have communities in each of the provinces, and it is so, they are so close to the population. These people know what is missing. you can come up with all kinds of programs, people sitting in Ottawa in their office, but it's these people out there that have seen the problems, that have seen the misery, that have seen what this COVID-19 has done to the elders, to the youth, to the kids. I mean, these are the ones that we have to be reaching out and have the resources to help them. If the programs that they deemed necessary for their area, because I am sure, what would work in Saskatchewan would not necessarily work out in Labrador, for instance. I will be the first one to admit that. But these are the people out there. These are the people on the ground. These are the people that the federal government, through CAP's help, should be reaching out to.
Before my time is up, I just would like to congratulate the Friendship Centers and all other organizations working so hard to provide services for your members. This has not been easy based on the testimony we've been hearing today and in previous meetings. Every organization is trying to make the best of the situation for your members, their families, the children, the communities, homeless people, people with disabilities, pre-existing medical conditions. Thank you for everything you're doing, and keep up the good work, and hopefully we will be able to get through this. I know we will together, and work to going back to normal, whatever that normal looks like at the end of it. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Mr. Van Couverden, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much to the witnesses today. Your feedback and perspective on these matters is essential, and strong Indigenous voices indeed add to the work that we are empowered to do here on this committee in such a relevant way. So thank you. Thank you to Chief Bertrand for your advocacy and for fighting for your community. And I echo your sentiment with regards to the importance of UNDRIP. And I know many members of this committee share that sentiment. Thank you as well to Mr. Shepherd-Bouat for sharing your very relevant story and experience.
Adam, could you bring your mic down a bit? We're not hearing it.
Sorry. Should I start over, or were you able to hear? Thank you very much as well to Mr. Frost, Mesdames Cloutier, Forsma, and Kretschner for your essential work across the country, and I extend my condolences to your communities for the loss you've experienced. I am also, as well, speaking to you from ancestral lands. Mississauga is the New Credit First Nation here in Halton, Ontario. My question is a short one, and I'd like if Mr. Shepherd and the others that provide the services on the front lines to answer, if you could, with respect to Indigenous people that live in suburban areas. My riding is primarily suburban, not as close in proximity as some of the Friendship Centers that live in Toronto, but there are families in my riding who are Indigenous and require services as well. So if you could elaborate a little bit on the suburban, and I apologize if I cut you off, but we're going to try and stay on time. Thank you. Suppose I'd start with Madame Cloutier.
Microphone, s'il vous plaît.
Est-ce qu'on m'entend?
Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me? Thank you for your question. If I understand correctly, if we're talking about Indigenous families that live in suburban areas, how can we ensure that they get access to services? A friendship center like the one in Val d'Or that works for a small population compared to Toronto and Winnipeg is a hub for Indigenous communities, which increases the presence of Indigenous peoples in small areas like Val d'Or. That friendship center becomes that hub of services. We're not political representatives. We are organizations that offer first-line services, community services, and that's when we become important, because we become the community link, we become the cultural link, we become the identity link for these families. And when there's a pandemic like this one, it's these friendship centers that these families turn to, because we already have a trust relationship with these families.
Madame, merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Madame Cloutier.
Ms. Kretschmer, could you provide any context on the suburban Indigenous population that you undoubtedly serve?
I'll take up just a moment, and I'd like to turn it over to Larry to respond further. I would recommend that you familiarize yourself with what the Friendship Center is in your respective neighborhood. For Halton, I suspect that you're sort of sandwiched in between Peel, Hamilton, Niagara, Fort Erie. There are Friendship Centers. How to respond to the needs in the context of suburban, I think it's organizing transportation, it's communicating virtually, and it's thinking through how to approach this differently and allowing for those local self-determined needs to emerge through contacting those leaders directly. And I turn it over to Larry Nyala.
Thank you.
Larry, your mic is muted. Could we unmute your mic? I'm sorry, your mic is muted.
There.
You hear me now?
Be able to, yes, we can hear you now, Mr. Frost.
Yeah, just to
We're
add
almost
to
out
it,
of time. Yeah, go ahead.
just to add to that, as I said earlier, we're willing to help everyone. We all work together, but it's a matter of if you want to contract tasks, and there's funds available. We're always willing to help anybody that needs food or even housing. So we never stop just there. So
thank you, Mr. Frost.
Okay.
And if I could use my remaining time just to ask Mr.
There's no
Bertrand,
remaining time.
okay.
We have only two more witnesses, two more questioners, and we have barely enough time to get them in. And so, Ms. Berube, you have 2.5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for Edith Cloutier, Mrs. Edith Cloutier. With COVID-19, what is that going to change in the services that you provide and in the way that you provide them? And what measures has your organization taken to maintain essential services, all the while taking into account public health directives? Thank you for your question, Ms. Berube. This has been quite a challenge to implement first-line services, to maintain essential services, health services, social services, to help the homeless, to help women in a difficult situation. Friendship centers are organizations that already have an organizational ability, and we have leadership in our communities. We were thankfully able to reorganize our services by working virtually, by using technology, and we've maintained some direct services to the population, in-home visits, for example, a day center for the homeless that we had to move because in the context of the pandemic, with all the different conditions that entails, have necessitated a different organization. But we are also working in partnership with public health and with other partners in order to ensure adequate responses. The Val d'Or Friendship Center was on the front line because we have a very pertinent approach. We have a link with the people, and we were able to organize our services in order to be efficient on the front lines. Because of this trust relationship, the people we work with were able to use the technology. The data show that we were able to help several people, over 100 in our community. We were able to help many families when we deliver food, but the challenge is still there, that's for sure. Thank you, Ms. Cloutier.
And you'll be up. Mr. Schmale has his hand up. Do you have a point of order or something the committee should know, Mr. Schmale?
Yeah, I'd just like to talk about a few things. I'll let the witnesses finish, but before you adjourn, I'd like to just talk about a few things, if I could. I don't want to make a point of order because I don't want to take up the time, but I'd like to talk about it.
Ms. Gazan, you have 2.5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. My last question is for the National Association of Friendship Centers to Jocelyn in regards to data collection. So accurate data collection is essential to determine specific needs, and this has been identified as an issue by many urban Indigenous organizations who often lack the resources and the support to compile proper research. This includes gaps in census data, especially in relation to homeless populations. How can the government better support research and data collection to provide a more accurate depiction of the funding needs of urban Indigenous populations?
Thank you for the question. So we actually started working with Well Living House with Dr. Janet Smiley and putting together a bit of our own national coalition of organizations that would be able to do the data collection. We have some follow-up calls in the coming days, and also building on the work that the Yellowhead Institute had just recently published about just what they found by scrolling through obituaries and by talking to folks. So the data piece is huge. We've been talking to Indigenous services about what else we can do on the data collection piece. They know it's a gap, and so I'm hopeful that when we start this work with the Well Living House, that that ISK will come to the table to support that.
Yes, how can the government better address that gap?
Again, it goes to that jurisdictional quagmire, right? So national health policy for Indigenous people are set at the federal level, and a lot of the data collection's happening in hospitals or at the provincial level. So what is collected doesn't truly reflect what maybe the national data needs are. So I think we really need to push the provinces to ensure they're collecting the disaggregated data. And then I think with the public health at the local and regional levels, that we need to be instilling how important it is for this disaggregated data. If we don't know who the people are that are being affected by this, I don't know how we even have a hope of addressing this at the community
Just
level.
one last yes or no question. Do you feel that the lack of support around data collection is impacting your ability to access proper support required to service the community? Yes
or no?
Yes.
Thank
you.
I would like to thank all of our witnesses. This has been a very informative meeting from the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples, National Chief Bertrand, National Association of Friendship Centers, Christopher Shepard Biot, the President, and Jocelyn Formsa from the Toronto Aboriginal Support Services Council, Larry Frost and Lindsay Kretschmer, Swooping Hawk, Executive Director, and from the Val-d'Or Native Friendship Center, Edith Cloutier, Executive Director. Thank you all. Before I adjourn the meeting, Mr. Schmale, did you have an issue that you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, just in terms of procedurally going forward. So I know Bob Zimmer dropped the notice of motion.
Yeah.
It wasn't an actual motion, so it wasn't debatable. But having said that, I hit the raise hand button immediately, and other people went ahead, which is fine. But I'm just saying this going forward. Is there a way in which we can get the attention of the chair to speak without unmuting our mics? Like I tried to do a chat with the chair just to say I want to like to bring up an issue, but there was no way to do it. No feature I could reach you at other than turning on my microphone and interrupting the meeting.
So what I suggest is we have an informal meeting coming up. We can do that with the clerk and determine. I'm beside myself and trying to juggle all of these things and then look for a small blue hand. So, and I know you understand that. Yeah. So let's pick that up offline. And it's a very good point, and I appreciate that.
Because you could see how it could come into trouble if we had an actual motion and the speaking order got out of control.
Yeah, I think the raise hand is the best way, and it's on the far right side of my screen, and it's small, so I'll do my best to pay more attention to that as this first attempt at solving this. I did actually solve the problem of getting Ms. Berube her proper place in the speaking order, which I
baby steps.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you all, and the next meeting will be Friday, May the 15th from 2 to 4 p.m. I declare this meeting adjourned.
Thank you. Walalan.
you.